I wanted to do a video covering Sonny Bill Williams versus Chauncy Welliver. The fight has taken place. I didn't watch it live. I've tracked down a clip of on YouTube which showed quite extended highlights, so I feel like I've had a good overview of what happened in the fight. I must admit I haven't sat down and watched every minute of it, but I've watched the extended highlights. I've also read numerous reports. I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but I must say I was quite impressed by Sonny Bill Williams. He actually surprised me in many ways. Like, I did a pre-fight video which I sort of suggested it may be very, very tough for Sonny Bill. I said Welliver was very experienced, knew his way around the ring, he knew a few tricks, and if Sonny Bill performed like he did against Franz Botha, I could possibly see an upset. Now, that didn't happen. It was a complete and utter domination from Sonny Bill Williams, and he really did, to me, show vast improvement from the Franz Botha fight even. As I mentioned, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, I'll come on to that in a minute, but this was a much better performance from Sonny Bill Williams. Let's talk about what he did right. For me, in his last fight, it was very clear that he was relatively new to boxing. It was very clear that he was green. It was clear that he was quite inexperienced in a professional ring. That was less obvious. I'm not saying it wasn't still there, but it was much less obvious against Welliver. You know, his movement was slightly more fluid. It was slightly less robotic. He threw some pretty nice, pretty tasty combinations in at times. And he wasn't just throwing a robotic 1-2 and single shots and moving. He was actually throwing calculated, smooth inside shots. So there's one particular uppercut that really caught the eye, and he kind of slipped it in on the inside through Welliver's guard. You know, Welliver is a very experienced journeyman, been in the ring with some real top fighters, and he's a shrewd guy. He's got ring savvy. He knows his way around the ring, and for me, Sonny Bill landing a shot like that, controlling the distance, moving, you know, working the body, he wasn't as inaccurate either. There was seemed to be increased accuracy. I thought it was actually a really, really good performance. I expected him to struggle, and I expected him to be exposed against Welliver. Not because Welliver's any great sakes, but you know, he's a lot younger than Franz Botha, and he's got a similar level of experience and sort of savvy as I've mentioned. So I was really impressed by Sonny Bill Williams. We know he's a big guy, a strong guy. We know he's a phenomenal athlete. We know he's in great condition, but he showed slightly more than that to me, and he didn't have the same amateurishness about his work that I think he did in the Franz Botha fight. Now, the reason I'm not getting ahead of myself is, whilst Welliver isn't as bad as he looks to the eye, you know, he looks terrible. He's so out of condition. He's so fat. He looks absolutely woeful. Us boxing fans know he actually isn't the worst opponent out there. I mean, relatively recently, he's been having fights with the likes of Lucas Brown, Ustamov, Odliner Solis. You know, this is a guy who's, you know, been in some decent fights with some decent fighters. You have to question whether Chauncy Welliver needs to call it a day now. I think he's had something like 70 professional fights. He's become nothing more than a professional opponent, and the amount of punishment he's taking, the amount of heavy shots he's taking, you have to question whether it may be better for him to call it a day and focus his energies on other efforts. My concerns with Sonny Bill Williams are, obviously he's a fit man, you know, he's a phenomenal athlete, plays world-class level rugby. However, how will that fitness translate into a boxing ring when he's got someone forcing the pace, someone on his chest, someone asking him different questions? Because for me, he seemed to tire in the Franz Botha fight. You know, Welliver didn't ask any questions of him in that sense. Welliver was so plodding, so unathletic, so undynamic, so limited. He also didn't ask questions of the Sonny Bill Williams defence, which to me was a gaping hole in the Franz Botha fight. I think finally my biggest concern is, because boxing isn't really in Sonny Bill Williams' blood. You know, it's not something he's been doing since he was a child. I think he doesn't really know how to respond when he's hit, when he's hurt. It's not instinctive to him. You know, just like his footwork isn't like a natural instinct like it is to a Floyd Mayweather or a Bernard Hopkins. He doesn't have that. And I think Welliver was so poor, you know, and so uninspired that he didn't ask any questions of Sonny Bill Williams. So while Sonny Bill Williams did show some assets and some good attributes, I find it hard to get too enthused about him, because the doubts that he gave us in the Bofa fight, Welliver just didn't ask any questions, and we have to assume they're still there, because he hasn't, you know, how does he respond when he takes a hit? Is he defensively open? What's his stamina like when someone forces the pace? So I'm not going to get too excited, because the level of opposition was very limited tonight. Having said that, it was a really improved performance offensively. I thought he looked less robotic, less amateurish. I thought he threw nice shots from the inside. I think he's got a reasonable jab. And I think, yeah, I was fairly impressed. Let me know your thoughts. Who would you like to see him fight next? Thanks very much for watching.